Hi, I'm Angela Fair. When I was 18 years old, I took my very first watercolor class, and I've really never looked back since. I found in that class a passion that filled my life with color and has really changed the way I look at the world. And that's one reason I teach here on YouTube. It's so exciting to share my light bulb moments, the things I love about watercolor, with you. My goal today is to really break down color theory. For me, I just want to use color and have fun with it. And so I don't usually spend a lot of time talking about terminology. And so we're going to be really working with color in practical ways all this month. We're talking today about complementary colors. I'm excited to be sharing what I've learned about complementary colors with you. Let's get started. We're focusing today on complementary colors, and that means working with colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. I'm assuming you know our primary colors. Our Quinacridone rose is serving as our red or magenta, our Indian yellow is our yellow, and our phthalo blue is our blue. And with those primary colors, as soon as you start mixing them, you get complementary colors. Colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. I made myself a little visual to help me demonstrate this today. Over here I have my three primaries, my red, my blue, and my yellow. And then if I lock my fingers together, you can see I've created my secondary colors. Secondary colors being made from those two primary colors, so red and yellow, we get an orange, yellow and blue, we get a green, blue and red, we get a violet, and then I've got some neutrals thrown down on my thumbs and pinky finger. I'm assuming this is all stuff that you know because it's pretty straightforward for anybody who's done any color mixing in the past. You know that when you combine your primaries, you get those secondary colors. So when you're thinking about complementary colors, we go back to those primaries and we find our foundation there. If you remember that the complementary color to yellow is violet, the complement to red is green, and the complement to blue is orange, we can have a lot of fun with complementary colors. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that today. What I really want to do is show you how a single complementary color can really make your painting pop. I'm going to be painting a scene using these 6 basic colors from Blick Artists Watercolor. We're going to start just by playing with some of those basic colors. Again, I want to keep a cool color palette, so I'm going to be using blue and green and violet. On the cool side, we're going to avoid kind of the orange and red and rust at this point. And so I'm just using a little bit of the Cobalt violet mixed into my Phthalo blue to give me kind of a nice soft blue here. That's going to be my sky. And I'm painting wet on dry paper, which is my favorite way to start a painting because it gives me some really nice edges and a little bit of control. Let's use a little more of that Cobalt violet. It's just getting to know that color. It's really quite beautiful. Violet, of course, has some red in it, so it could, is probably looking like the warmest thing in the painting right now, and it is. Color temperature is relative, so when I have a painting with a lot of blue, anything that's got a hint of red or yellow or orange in it is going to feel warm. Now I want some distant hills. I think I'm going to use this Cobalt Turquoise, and let's try mixing it with the Cobalt Violet as well. And that's going to give me a violet, a greenish violet, hopefully. We're going to just make a hill here. I'm liking the way the paint has this lovely push. You can see where the paper is dry, I have a nice edge, but where the paper is wet, I'm getting this really pretty kind of soft and atmospheric effect. And that looks pretty, so I like it. I'm going to let it be. Now it is a predominantly cool painting, but that doesn't mean I can't choose to use some red. I'm going to use the Quinacridone rose to start mixing up a dark value color. I want to have some distant dark trees in my scene. So by mixing the rose and the phthalo blue, I'm getting a violet. I'm going to add a little of the yellow, the Indian yellow, to neutralize my violet. Remember, yellow and purple are opposite on the color wheel, so by adding that yellow in, you can see how quickly I got this kind of murky dark. It's kind of it's a little greenish actually. Let's do a little more yellow in there. If these are going to be dark distant trees, a little green is not a bad thing. And I could have chosen the Cobalt Turquoise because it does look like a green, but it's not a very dark value color. And so I want to work with the Phthalo Blue. It's much darker in value. And because everything's wet right now, I'm just going to have a lot of softness in that dark as I place it here. It's still not quite dark enough, but we would need this area to dry before we do any more with that, I think. And see how the sky, the pinky violet in the sky still feels like the warmest part of the painting. It really has this kind of pop to it where everything else feels very subdued. Let's mix some of this phthalo yellow green with the Cobalt Turquoise. And there's a little bit of violet in there too. That gives me a really nice soft green. Again, still cool colors. Just going to pull some of that down. And this is kind of foundational painting. If you're painting a landscape, it's really nice to start with pale washes of color, thin veils of color. Call this the T layer, where it's kind of a stain of color. And everything can flow together a fair bit. You can see that there was a little puddle of blue in the sky and it's kind of trickling down through my hill there. And I'm okay with that. I actually like kind of the transition of colors that's happening there. And this is a stage where I'm going to need to stop here shortly. I'm just going to see if I can't add maybe a little bit more to this painting before I set it aside to dry. And one reason I'm continuing rather than stopping is that the more I can get done in that first layer, provided I don't have just a big blurry mess where everything's so wet that all the colors have bled together, and it is quite moist. You can see how that those darks do flow and bleed. So I'm expecting that there's going to be some softness. But if I can get all those major shapes established in this first layer, it'll mean less work for me later. Maybe the painting will develop just a little bit more quickly. And so I like taking the time to see if I can't go a little bit darker in some of my dark areas. And add little hints of, you know, maybe grass down here. I know it's going to be soft and fuzzy and bleed into the colors I've already placed. But that adds, and over here you can see it's drying already, so it doesn't bleed as much. But that is already starting to add a little texture to my foreground that's going to be really quite nice and help support and inform the painting. I don't have to get a lot of detail into this scene to make it look like that soft pastoral landscape. Okay, this is a good point to let it dry. I'm not going to fuss over things or try to control the painting too much. I'm going to let those colors settle into the paper and dry, and as it's drying, some of the colors might still bleed a little bit. Some of the colors might get a little paler as they dry. Those are all things that we understand and expect in watercolor. And we want to allow room for them to happen. Look at how leaving that dry paper gave us this beautiful formation of clouds way off in the distance. There's this beautiful shape right here that really does look like big billowy clouds coming up over the hill. That one's like, I don't know, like a big mouth about to chomp down on the sky. But you know, that's the fun thing, finding shapes in the clouds. Don't we all love to do that? And so once this painting is dry, we're going to come in, we're going to keep working with these cool colors and add our pop of warm color right at the end. When we work with colors that are all kind of fairly the same range of color or temperature, you know, mostly blue-green and just a tiny touch of violet here, there's a mood that happens. It's pretty calm, pretty peaceful. We don't see a lot of tension in a scene with this much color harmony. And so it's in adding those pops of kind of contrasting temperature, contrasting color, that we can really create that feeling of energy and tension. I'm going to just start with some distant darks. And in a landscape, often it's really helpful to put in some darks off in the distance because that helps to give us that contrast in the place we want our viewer to go. We want to pull our viewer into the painting. We don't want them to stay anchored in any one place, or especially in the nearer parts of the painting where often we have quite a lot of detail. If I'm going to be painting some of the grasses and weeds in the foreground, it's going to be really easy to put a lot of detail there. And it might be difficult then for the viewer to pull away and look at the rest of the painting. So placing our darkest darks off in the distance here actually is really effective to pull that viewer back into the painting. You can see now my eye instantly goes to those darks. I'm going to do a little more contrast in my sky as well, just kind of with my cool blue violet again. That's going to help build up some of those cloud shapes because I didn't lift out a lot of whites in my clouds. I didn't leave a lot of white space. So I didn't end up with a lot of contrast there, except down at the bottom. So I'm just going to emphasize that just a little bit more. And going a little darker at the top up here is actually going to also do its part to pull the viewer to those areas where the colors and values are a little bit lighter. And phthalo blue mixed with a red makes actually some really nice rich violets that you can have a lot of fun playing with. Darkening up the sky again brings the eye down to those areas where we have some very strong contrast. We have white against our cooler blue-gray hills. Yeah, that feels good. Now I'm going to use my cooler greens at this point, and that phthalo blue just takes over. I'm going to use some of those cooler greens now in my foreground and paint some grasses. I'm going to try to keep it really loose by kind of using a messy brush, really squiggly. I'll do it quickly, not get too rigid and detailed. Now I want to add in that warm color. And I'm going to do it up in here. We'll see what it does. I've got kind of a rusty yellow. Watercolor is transparent, so it's going to overlap with the blue greens that are up there, and that's going to cool it off a little bit, but you can already see how warm it looks in contrast to the cooler temperature parts of the painting. We're going to emphasize those contrasts even more by going cooler as we move down the page. I'm going to let that color run so we get some softness as well. All right, look at how that warm color just starts to bring the eye up. We already were looking in that area because of the darkest darks. This addition of those cool, warm colors is going to help accentuate that. Often at this stage of the painting, I might choose a opaque color, one that is a little less transparent, to create my pops of contrasting temperature color. So a pop of cobalt teal on a otherwise warm painting. A pop of orange in this case on a painting that's otherwise quite cool. And those placements of that warmer color, well, you can see what they do in the painting. And they've changed the mood of our painting just a little bit. There's a little bit more light in the scene and a little bit more energy now because we are bringing in a color that changes the temperature balance in the scene. Blue-green, which actually looks quite cool in this painting, could look a lot warmer if we weren't comparing it to the yellows in the scene when it was the only color with a little bit of yellow in it, because green has a bit of yellow in it. It was warmer feeling than it is now. This is a pretty simple landscape scene. I haven't put a lot of detail into it. It's pretty, I've done landscapes like this so many times. This is my training ground for trying out colors, getting to know new colors. These Blick Artists watercolors are new to me, so I'm getting to know them and getting a feel for them. And it's where I think about my strategies for making my landscape paintings more effective, and it's where I experiment and play. And in that process, I build my toolbox with tons of strategies that I can use for all sorts of subject matter. And that makes my painting stronger. So I'm not ashamed to be doing simple landscape scenes, sky, hill, land, a little bit of grass, because of the way it has taught me, this very subject has taught me so much.